Well, a swarm of drone strikes has hit Moscow in the largest attack on the city since the beginning of this war. Putin has responded with strikes in the heart of Ukraine's intelligence service, and Ukraine is trying to fast-track its membership into NATO. Are we at a turning point in this war? Where are we right now? Let's ask former UN weapons inspector and former U.S. Marine Scott Ritter. Scott is back on the show. Great to see you, Scott. You just returned from Russia, and I just got to ask you, I mean, I was following your travels there on social media a little bit for a month. You know, everyone says, well, you know, Russia is being destroyed with sanctions. It's a shell of its former self. I'm sure the grocery stores are empty. People are starving. Putin is dying of cancer. What is the truth? What did you see when you were in Russia?
Well, I can't address any issues pertaining to Vladimir Putin's health. I didn't meet him. So I don't
right.
know.
He's got kidney failure. There's a long list of things that apparently the West loves to say that he's dying of. So, yeah,
you know, for a dying man, I would tell you his presence in Russia is very vigorous and vibrant. He travels a lot. He speaks a lot. He's a visible leader. So if this is what a dying man looks like, then I think Russians will want him to keep dying for a long time, because he's alive and well and living and leading, and that's the important thing. He's leading, and the Russians recognize him as their leader. You know, we speak of the war and the military aspects of this conflict, and I guess we'll touch on that in a second. But you know, Clausewitz, Sun Tzu, and other famous military philosophers have all said something similar along the lines of war is an extension of politics by other means. And this war was never supposed to. This war, first of all, was provoked by the West. I think everybody needs to understand that. This was not a war that Russia wanted. Russia was provoked into this war. It's a provocation that's been going on since 1992. In 2008, the exact consequences of trying to invite NATO or Ukraine into NATO were set forth in writing by William Burns. He's the current CIA director, former U.S. ambassador, and he said straight up, if you invite Ukraine into NATO, you will set in motion events that will lead to a Russian military intervention. He wrote that in early 2008. In November 2008, Ukraine was invited. So the West has been provoking this military intervention for some time now. But the idea was that the military intervention would trigger sanctions that would destroy Russia. You see, it wasn't that the West was going to defeat Russia militarily or that Ukraine was going to defeat Russia. The idea was to hold Russia militarily until the economy collapsed, and then create a sort of Moscow Maidan movement to replicating the 2014 coup d'etat that evicted Viktor Yanukovych. That was the goal. That was the objective. Newsflash, it has failed miserably. I arrived in Novosibirsk, the third largest city in Russia, the largest growing economy in Russia. There is so much investment taking place right now, foreign investment, internal investment. I don't think the people who planned the sanction campaign understand the reality of Russian economy. By sanctioning, for instance, the Russian oligarchs and taking their money from them, it was one of the most welcome moves by the Russian people. They applauded the West for doing that, because for decades the Russian people and the Russian government had been angered by the flight of Russian capital out of Russia by these oligarchs who steal money from the Russians and then take it abroad. So the Russians applauded this. But by locking the Russian oligarch class out of Western investment possibilities, there are now literally $1 trillion plus of capital waiting to be invested. And these people have no choice but to invest it in Russia.
Wow.
And so they are pouring money into Russia. You know, a year ago during the pandemic, in the post-pandemic environment, the planners for Russian urban areas were looking for capital. They didn't have enough money. I mean, they were building, but there were so many projects to do, so they had to allocate their resources carefully. They're in a situation now where they don't know how to spend the money. There is so much money available right now that they are literally funding projects that otherwise would not have been funded. You can't go anywhere in a major urban environment in Russia without seeing cranes taking place, buildings going up, and these buildings are already allocated in terms of the workspace. Companies are flooding into Russia from around the world. Newsflash, America and the Europe. You ain't the only players in town. In fact, you're nobody compared to the rest of the world. The rest of the world, the global south, India, Pakistan, Iran, China, are coming into Russia, investing. There has been no pause whatsoever. Russia is accelerating right now. Russia is the healthiest it has been ever. In its entire history, Russia has never been this healthy economically. When I go around the United States, there's these little joke stickers, because Joe Biden, of course, is infamously, called everything that's happened wrong in America Putin's tax. Putin did this, Putin did that, Putin did that. And yet people mocked it because they, you get to the gas station, you have high Oprah, and there's these little stickers with Joe Biden saying, I did this, right. Pointing at it.
Right.
I have to tell you that the standing joke right now in Russia is thank you, Joe Biden.
Wow.
Thank you, Joe Biden, because they are literally looking at it saying, do you not understand what you have done? You have made this economy, this Russian economy, so vibrant, so vigorous. Is it perfect? No, it's not a utopia. The Western media will always be able to go out and find little chinks in the armor and say, aha, what about this? What about that? What about this? Guys, you're missing the big picture. The big picture is Russia is alive, well, living, thriving. There are no empty shelves in Russia. No empty shelves in Russia. Prices in Russia are ridiculously low. When people say, Russia's GDP matches that of, Italy or whatever, guys, you're missing the point. Purchasing power. The ruble is because prices are so low and inflation's so low, you get more bang with the ruble than you do with the buck. And so even though on paper it may not look like the Russians make as much money, what they're able to do with their money in terms of spending and quality of life is amazing. And then the other thing I will say is this. If you thought you were going to break the spirit of the Russian people, think again. One of the greatest gifts, the second greatest gift that the West gave was creating the condition where Vladimir Putin was compelled to partially mobilize, the 300,000 people that he mobilized back in September. Sent a panic through the non-believers. When I say non-believers, I mean the people that didn't support Putin, the Navalny supporters. Around 300, 400,000 of them fled Russia, much to the glee of the West. You know what Russia did? They opened the doors and said, go. And you literally got rid of all the empty baggage. All of the dead weight in Russian society is gone, and the Russians are ecstatic because they don't have to deal with these people who hate Putin, who hate Russia from their perspective. You ran away from your country when your country needed you. There are many people that I worked with in Russia during this trip who are not Putin supporters. I will tell you that straight up. They support Russia, and Putin is the leader, so they're not going to turn their back on him, but they have questions. They have a lot of questions, and at some point in time, Putin will be called upon to answer these questions. But when Russia needed them, they are there, they stayed, they are loyal, they are patriotic, and that is the nation right now. They're not a bunch of chest-thumping USA fake American patriots, sunshine soldiers who are patriotic, but they don't do anything. These are Russians who are stoic, and they are there. They are working. This is not a defeated nation. This is a nation that's in it for the long haul, and they have a vision that's far greater than anything anybody in the West has been able to articulate about what their vision towards Russia is. Russia is thinking beyond Ukraine. Ukraine is a big topic. Russia's working that issue. It's frustrating for many Russians that it's taken this long to solve the issue. But the Russians are also looking beyond Ukraine. They're looking towards a world where Russia is part of a multipolar community that the United States no longer directs. The United States is invited to the table, but the day and age of America telling people what to do is over, finished, and that's clear in Russia today.
Yeah, it's clear, of course, with the 30 new additional countries that want to join the BRICS nations as well. It's sunsetting on the U.S. dollar, as we've been covering here on this show. You were there then in Russia when that drone strike hit the Kremlin, hit the Capitol. At the time, of course, Zelenskyy came out and gave a speech, said we had nothing to do with that. The United States now says they did. Of course, we've been saying before that they don't do anything without NATO's supervision or involvement in any of this. So it was all a joke to begin with. And then overnight, or the past 48 hours, we've seen a swarm of drones hitting Moscow. They say, of course, that those the defense of the Russian Ministry of Defense says they were all taken care of. A few of them hit residential buildings, though. So when you were there among the people and hearing their response, were they stunned that, oh my gosh, now Moscow is now under attack?
No. Look, the Russians know that they're at war. That strike on the Kremlin took place, I believe, on May 3rd, in the lead up to Victory Day. And let me just give you another thing. In America and in Europe, they sell Victory Day, May 9th, as some sort of Putin-generated propaganda exercise, where Red Square is filled with the loyalists, and there's a lot of made-for-TV moments. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, watching this show, Victory Day is real. It's a real Russian holiday, and it's a Russian holiday that resonates with every single Russian, because 27 million Soviets died during World War II at the hands of Nazi Germany. There's not a family in Russia that didn't suffer the harshest possible consequences of that conflict. They look to the sky because they know in their hearts that their grandparents, their parents, their relatives are looking down on them, holding them to account for what they do in honor of the sacrifice that was made. This is part of the Russian soul. And that's the other thing I learned on this trip is, in the West, we mock the Russian soul. We hear people say that, we dismiss it. It's real. It resonates. It defines Russia. It is who the Russian people are. So anybody who thought that you could launch a drone strike on Moscow on May 3rd and somehow panic the Russians into doing something, on May 9th, the actual day of the parade, Moscow was struck, I believe, by 9 to 12 drones. You didn't hear about it, but it was there. The drone attack came in. The Russians shot down most of them. It's an issue. Are the Russians frustrated by this? Yes. Would they like perfect air defense? Yes. But these drones are slow. They're low flying. They're hard to detect. And they're just a mosquito bite. It's a propaganda exercise. But the Russians aren't losing sight. This is a nation that is committed to victory, not victory just in Ukraine, but victory against the collective West. And a handful of drone strikes are not going to change any aspect of that. What it has done is liberated the Russian leadership to start taking out what they call decision-making centers. And ask the Ukrainians how that feels. They just lost their military intelligence headquarters. They lost it. It's gone.